the Asher Longevity Institute, we are committed to describing the 9 steps needed to achieve an unlimited life. In Step 6, John Asher discusses 1 medication and 3 prescription drugs that ward off cancer and therefore enhance longevity. He also describes 3 other prescription drugs that have an off-label benefit that directly extend life significantly. Let's drop into the presentation now.
Let's go to Step 6. Now we can get to a nice controversial step. So there are many people who say, I'm not taking any prescriptions unless I really need to. And many doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, of course, do no harm. So if you have a primary physician, he or she won't recommend taking prescriptions unless you need them because of the potential side effects, for example. And this whole area of using off drugs that have already been approved by the FDA for an off-label use, or the correct medical term is adjuvant use, or think additional use. And again, it's a big hot subject today with COVID-19. Can we use that drug approved for malaria? Can we use the one approved for lupus? Could they be effective for COVID-19? And there's 2 big studies going on right now in New York City. Emergency studies, first ever approved by the FDA. There are drugs that will help us ward off cancer and also have direct benefit on longevity. So here's the 7. 6 of these are drugs and 1 is a medication, aspirin. So I don't have a heart problem, but I'm taking a baby aspirin every day. I don't have high blood pressure, but I'm taking a beta blocker. I don't have type 2 diabetes, but I'm taking metformin. I'm taking the other 3. I'm going to show you why for all of these. So here's the first 4. So you can see the name of the drug or medication on the first column. The second column shows what it's typically used for. And then the third column is the additional benefit. And so all 4 of these have an effect on reducing the probability of getting these cancers mentioned in each one of the columns. And then the suggested dose is out there to the right. Now let's take a look at metformin. Here's the bottom line on metformin. 30 million people in the U.S. have type 2 diabetes. And if you have type 2 diabetes, you lose 15 years of your health span, 10 years of your lifespan. So one of my wife's girlfriends in Norfolk, her husband just died at 71 last week. He's had type 2 diabetes forever. He's had 1 leg amputated. He lost his eyesight 3 years ago. So it was a miserable end of life. And had renal failure, rejected dialysis, and died. And the classic drug for type 2 diabetes is metformin, and he didn't want to take it. So here's the studies on metformin. If you have type 2 diabetes and you take metformin, you outlive people who don't have type 2 diabetes. So huge studies over 30 million people, metformin has an obvious benefit to longevity. And the FDA just started a clinical trial of this. It's the first time a clinical trial has ever been started on an existing drug for an off-label use for longevity. The data is that strong. So here's essentially what I just said. Here's the next 3 recommended for a longevity benefit. This is real controversial because these are nasty drugs. So the first one, rapamycin, if you had a liver transplant, then your body will naturally want to reject it. But if you take rapamycin in big doses, it's a bacteria, by the way, only found on Easter Island, then the body will accept it. So that's its primary use. But it has a big benefit for longevity. And you don't need 2 weeks of a large dose of it. You need a little teeny dose only once a week to get the benefit for longevity. I'm going to show you what it is in a minute. Deprenyl, an approved drug, first as an antidepressant, then for use in Parkinson's disease, an off-label use. Also, an extremely small dose, 1 milligram per day. And then the nastiest, dasatinib, it's a chemo drug. And again, big doses where you're getting the chemotherapy if you have this type of cancer, leukemia. But again, only a little tiny bit of this and only twice a year will give you the longevity benefit. So let's take a closer look. Before I get to it, I want to show you what trials and studies are available so that we can see, as I tell you what trials and studies are behind these, you can see whether you would take it or not. So first is a classic clinical trial. A drug company will propose a new drug to the FDA. The FDA will approve the study. They're randomized a long period of time, big, expensive, tens of millions of dollars, placebo-controlled, which means one group gets the drug, the other doesn't. And so over a couple of years, you can really know, since there's only one variable, whether the drug has a benefit. You can measure it, and you can also see the side effects. And in the end, if the benefit's good and the side effects aren't too bad, the FDA will approve it. So that's a clinical trial, the gold standard of tests for a new drug. Then there are epidemiology studies where there's no real one variable you can tell. There's many variables. And the two most famous are these Framingham studies from Harvard. I forget the numbers, but 200,000 doctors and 400,000 nurses. And every year since the start, I think it's 40 years ago, every year since the start, they take a physical every year. They fill out a form on what they do. Do they smoke? What's their weight? No, those types of measurements. And then you can say, over a long period of time, the nurses who were obese lived 7 years less. The nurses who smoked more than 2 packs a day lived 11 years less. So you can make broad inferences from epidemiology studies that are done over a long period of time. There are also meta-analyses, and this takes a whole bunch of different epidemiology studies to assess overall mortality risk. Then the next are studies in these organisms, which sounds kind of crazy, but it turns out that their genome is very close to the human genome. That's why they're studied. And the other reason they're studied is they have a very short lifespan, so that you can see the benefit very quickly, whereas we humans have a long lifespan, so to see the benefit of a longevity drug on us takes a long time. And then, of course, there's small studies in humans. So I'm going to show you these 3 drugs. With this knowledge, then you can assess for yourself. Let's look at rapamycin first. So if you look at that third bullet, rapamycin has been studied over probably 20 years at all these organisms, including in dogs in Canada. In the U.S., it's against the law to do studies on dogs, but in Canada they do. So imagine in Canada, when they give this to dogs, they live 25% longer. So the question is, would you take it? So again, it's a very small dose, only taken once a week. And to give you an example, 2 years ago, I went to my primary doctor and I said, Tim, we've been friends for a long time. I said, Tim, I want to take rapamycin. He said, what for? You don't need an organ transplant. I said, yeah, but it's got this great longevity benefit. He said, well, show me the studies. So I showed him this, plus many, the details of all these studies. And he said, I don't think so, John. This isn't enough for me. There's never been a clinical trial on this by the FDA. Here was my reaction. Here's what I actually said. I said, Tim, you're killing me. I can't wait 20 years for an FDA-approved trial on this. I'm almost 80. So he still wouldn't do it. So I found myself a longevity doctor, and she prescribed it. So I'm taking rapamycin. Next is Deprinyl. And again, extremely low dose, 1 milligram a day. And then, if you want to get rid of all those excessive senescent or dead cells in your brain that's going to lead to Alzheimer's typically, back to sales, there's the good, better, best solutions. So here's where aggressive fasting comes in, which is good. Taking these 2 supplements, essentially green and black tea together, and quercetin, which together are a supplement, or taking that chemo drug is the best, but in 2 very small, safe, semi-annual doses, especially if you're over 60, when the Alzheimer's and dementia first start coming in view. Well, I'm taking all of this. So the question is, would you? As I said, this is controversial, but if you really have the goal of living towards an unlimited life, this is a key step. And I'm taking them all. All our guys are taking them all.
We hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to watch the entire series, including the most important, 9th step. If you would like to download a simplified checklist of Step 6, click the link in the description. And to stay abreast of emerging protocols to extend life, consider becoming a premium member at www.asherlongevity.com.